All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for making time on your Monday, Groundhog Day afternoon. I'm Jennifer Martinez, the manager of teacher services here at Music Well, and so nice to see you all, virtually. So, we're going to get kicked off here soon. On my screen, I have the QR code for attendance. I'm also going to pop a direct link in the chat. If you can fill that out for us, it's just a really quick form, and that will make you eligible for some of the cool prizes that we'll do at the end of this session. So we have some Sweetwater gift cards and then some USB microphones up for grabs. So you don't want to miss out on filling that out. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my colleague, Mary Claxton, the Director of Teaching and Learning here at Music Well.
Hi, everybody. Again, yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to be here and I'm very excited for this conversation. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of context of the amazing Kat Reinhert, and we're going to be talking about songwriting today. So, I was instructed to do the short version of the bio because as a presenter, there's nothing worse than hearing your full bio read aloud. So, Kat is a songwriter, vocalist, multi-instrumentalist, band leader, producer, author, and educator. She's released 5 independently produced albums and worked alongside a ton of artists and songwriters and written for, I think this is the best of all, Sesame Street, as well as collaborating on podcast theme songs. She's an author and has written an incredible book that hopefully some of you all will check out or have already, Songwriting for Music Educators. She's also written action-based approaches in popular music education. And she's joining us from New York City today, and we're so grateful to have you here, Kat. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It's going to be so fun. We also have one more book, which is like How to Release Music, which just came out in November too. So that's like super psyching,
Amazing.
exciting.
Yeah. Well, this is just such an important topic for us to talk about, whether you on the call are a student, whether you are a music educator, an admin, talking about songwriting and creative approaches to music making is truly one of the most important things that we can be doing creatively. Kat, I would love for you to kind of give us a little bit of your journey in songwriting. How did you kind of get into this pathway? And then, what does it mean to you to be a songwriter? Which is a big question, but
Oh, I like the second one. Okay. How did I get into songwriting? Well, it was later actually. I didn't write like really my first official song until I was about 19. So I I have a lot of students who are like, "I wrote my first song when I was 7, and I wrote mine when I was 11," and I'm like, "I wrote mine when I was 19." And I think writing when you're younger is really cool, but you don't always have all the tools, like, when you come to the table, and at 19, I already had 2 years of music school, and I was at the Manhattan School of Music in New York City as a jazz student, and so I brought a lot to the table when I started writing songs, like harmonic, sophistication, understanding of lyrics and words and things that I can say my 11-year-old self did not know any of those things, you know? So I think it's important to say that it doesn't matter when you start writing songs, like, you could start today and be 50, and that's cool, you know? It's a creative act, and I think as humans like, it's just such a really cool outlet. And so I started writing and didn't get a lot of, like, really great, feedback or even, a lot of really great help. I read a lot of books and just tried to write stuff and listen to stuff, but I didn't really have a lot of, "Rah, rah, go, go, you can do this." That all came internally until I was getting my master's degree at the University of Miami, and I took, like, an independent study in songwriting. And I worked basically on a song that I have out in the world called "The Brooklyn Dodger" for almost the entire semester, like, rewriting lyrics, writing lyrics, like, by the time it was, like, 2 months in, and I had all of the lyrics and no music, but we just spent, like, a lot of time really digging into, like, what is lyric craft and, like, how does that work? And then I sat down at a piano one day, and in 5 minutes, I had the entire song, like, laid out. So it was I mean, it's such a a fun thing to do, and then I just kept writing. It became like a bug, and it has since become the lens through which I kinda do all of the music in my life. So if I'm gonna practice something, it's because I wanna write a song. I started playing the guitar during the pandemic and got really hooked. I mean, I was practicing like 2 hours a day, and I'd never played the guitar, so this was, like, kind of my pandemic project. But it was all in the service of playing and writing my own music, like, to this day, I can play one song on the guitar that's not mine, and it's "Both Sides Now" by Joni Mitchell, and for most people playing the guitar, they're like, "You don't know any covers?" And I'm like, "Nope. I know, I don't know, 50 of my songs." But
If
I
you're
can't
gonna do one, though, it's a
I
pretty big choice.
yeah, but I'm a huge Joni Mitchell fan, so, I also figured out Chelsea Morning, I think, at one point, but, like, not to the point of being able to play it in front of anyone, and so
Yeah.
that's a generally, like, I've found a very different approach, but, I mean, I already had a PhD in music by the time I started writing songs and 2 degrees in jazz, so, like, my theory and, like, musical knowledge was really strong. It was just this new instrument that I was applying things to, and I actually found it ridiculously freeing because I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I would just play stuff on the guitar and be like, "This sounds cool." And I think it was the first time in probably 30 years that I was, like, not knowing what I was playing. Because if I sit down at a piano, if I don't even have to, like, open my eyes, like, I can tell you what chord I'm playing, what extension is it, if it's a D minor 7 flat 5 with a flat 9, like, I know what's underneath my fingers so hard that, like, playing the guitar was such a fun it's been such and it continues to be a fun journey where I don't always know I know what, like, the tonality of the chord is and, like,
Right.
where it kinda needs to go, but I'm always kind of, like, searching, like, where I know I want that, like, where is it, And, it's fun, so
Right. I always find that too if I'm writing on an instrument that I'm less familiar with, which is usually, honestly, most of them because 'cause I'm a drummer primarily, but if I'm, kind of a little bit bound by my instrument, I stumble into things that I would never write
yeah,
otherwise.
it's such a great tool, like, anyone on this call, if you always write on a certain instrument, pick up something you don't play really well and, like, try because it will just take you on a fun journey, and it's frustrating too, but, like, it's also just fun to let go and be free. So,
Right.
yeah.
And for anyone who's watching who feels like you're not good enough at an instrument to start writing,
Oh,
just
man.
go for it.
Yeah, the first song I ever wrote is called "Paris in the Snow." It's out, but, like, when I first wrote it, like, the guitar teacher I was working with would give me, like, chord shapes and strumming patterns, and I would write him a song with whatever he gave me every 2 weeks. And this was the first one I wrote, and I mean, I couldn't get through the song, like, my fingers hurt, I was like, "I know this is gonna work, but I can't actually play through the entire song," and, fast forward 2 years later, and we went into the studio, and I recorded it with my band, like, tracked live, and, I think, like, anyone here, like, yeah, just put in the time, it's just practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I'd love to actually I think that's like a great segue into my first big question for you, which is kind of getting started with a new song when you have the blank page in front of you. And it sounds like one thing that helped you is like not always having the page be blank and having some like different prompts. But are you a person who starts with like a beat, a melody, chords, lyrics? Like where do you tend to go or do you mix it up?
Yes. Which I know, but, like, I mean, so my modus operandi, MO, is sort of to find a groove. At this point, I'm pretty much only playing guitar. I haven't really played piano in, like, 4 years, which, I don't know, just guitar became fun, and I don't have a piano either, so I have a keyboard, and it's weighted, but that's a really different thing, I'm sure you understand, than picking up
Yeah.
an actual instrument, and so I come up with a groove and usually some sort of like a vamp, between two chords and some sort of like pattern that's within some sort of time signature and some sort of like BPM. I can't say I would know what that was, but it's either like fast, medium, or slow.
Yeah, like
Um,
just a ballpark speed.
yeah, it's just kind of like, oh, this particular pattern feels good underneath this, or something picking or something like that. And then I will I have a list, like a running list of song ideas that I just continually update, on my phone in my notes app. God forbid if anything ever happens to my phone, but, like, yeah, they're called, I teach at Berkeley, and, uh they call them song seeds, so it's basically like a song idea, and so I have probably a list of 500 song ideas, and I just start scrolling down them, and I sort of they all have different vibes, and it's sort of which one of these ideas, like, vibes with what I've got here. So, like, I find something that's, like, vibey, and then I start kinda making up a melody and seeing what lyrics kinda come out. It's very organic. That's kind of like the way if someone were to ask me, "How do you write a song?" That's sort of, like, my favorite way. But, um, number 1 being a teacher of songwriting or a professor of songwriting, like, I have tried all of the ways, and, the one that's the most difficult for me is if I have a melody first or someone gives me a melody and I have to set lyrics to it. That is the most difficult for me ever because melodies have stresses, and then I can't choose the word I wanna choose because it doesn't go with the stress of the melody unless I wanna stress it incorrectly, which doesn't always work because it doesn't say what you wanna say, and so that's the hardest one for me. Everything else is sorta, like, fun. I'll often write full lyrics, like, on a train and come up with an idea and then get home and put the music to it. Yeah, I think as a songwriter, if you're looking to be a songwriter or work on your songwriting skills, one of the best things you can do is try to write in all different ways, because
Yeah.
every way that you do it brings up something different in your creative flow, and you learn something about your writing, and you learn something about what gets sticky for you and where you kinda get stuck in your head about, like, "Oh, you're not good enough," or "What are you doing?" Like, those voices come in louder in certain situations, and the more that you work in those situations, the less those voices start to pop up in any situation, and you're like, "Yeah, you wanna hand me lyrics and I'll write you a melody? Cool. You wanna hand me a melody and I'll write you lyrics? Amazing." Hardest one, don't like that one, but to kind of avoid it, but, like, I can do it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was so funny, like, was in a room full of music educators last week, and I said, "Alright, show me with your hands. Do you write lyrics first, music first, or are you, the unicorn that does both at the same time?" Because I know that there's some people who like to sit down with their instrument and they're just, like,
Yeah,
see what
that's
comes
me.
out.
Yeah.
I love that. And it was so interesting how much of a mix it was. And so just to see, I'm like, "Oh, well, sometimes these people find each other and they just work together." But then other times, it's just a matter of like, "Okay, yeah, this is like what works best for me," and I do it most of the time, but then if I really wanna mix things up, I might try the other kinda direction.
Yeah. I mean, even, like, on the plane last week to LA, like, I was sitting there with Logic and, like, my little Rolly, and I was, like, playing around with loops, and, like, I created an entire track and a melody that went over the top of it and a lyric that went with the melody, like, in my head as I'm sitting in the middle seat on the plane from Boston to LA. I wrote this entire song, like, sitting there, without being able to sing.
I'm positive that your seatmates the whole time were just like,
Oh, I was
"What's
like, "Yeah." And it was so, like I was just like, "This is great," you know? What a great way to pass time.
Yeah, definitely. So I would love actually to talk a little bit deeper about lyric writing because I
Yeah.
think for some people, especially if we're like, I love music, but lyrics feel like this thing that you either kind of like innately know how to do it or it escapes you. And I'd love to like hear about your approach to kind of lyric writing and making it more grounded in reality?
Well, it doesn't have to be grounded in reality. And I think that's something people forget about, right? And I think that's actually a really great point to bring up first is that you have to serve the story of this, you have to serve the song, not necessarily the legitimate truth of the story, right? Because sometimes, like, a shift in like your story will actually make for a better song. And you always have to serve the song. So that's the winner overall. So you might have had something happen and it happened over the Manhattan Bridge, but in your song, using the word Brooklyn works better and evokes the feeling that you're actually trying to get. And so you have to use Brooklyn, even though the true story happened in Manhattan, or a different kind of cocktail that you might, or a different like beverage, it's a latte versus a cappuccino because you need two syllables, not three, and so like I think one thing is being true to the ethos of the story and like the feelings, but some of the details can sometimes shift and change to make sure that you're actually telling like serving the song. um, I'm a huge lyric nerd, like, I love words, so I think anyone who's trying to get better at lyrics, the first thing I would say is read, and I mean read everything. Read magazines, read books, read fiction books, read science books, read books that are interesting to you, read poems. I don't actually read a lot of poetry, it's not my favorite thing, to be honest, but, like, I probably finish somewhere between 1 to 3 books a week. Like, I read. And so because you need vocabulary and you need stuff in your head. And so, like, that's where you get it, is your brain starts, like, finding words, right? You need words to write lyrics. So that's, like, one. You can also kind of, like, if you're staring at a blank page and not sure where to start with lyrics and you have, like, an idea of, like, machine, for example, as, like, a random idea. You can start doing one of two things. You can do a free write, which is just, like, just writing kind of stream of consciousness about machine. Like, a machine is made of metal, and metal is kinda cool, but where do we get metal? Metal's from mines. We have to mine the metal, and you just start, like, you don't judge any of the writing, you're just like, what does your brain go to when you think about these kinds of things? And you just write for, like, 3 to 5 pages, like handwriting, because don't type. Handwriting, activates different parts of your brain than typing. Even if your writing is terrible, it doesn't matter. And so by the time you get done with 3 to 5 pages, it's kind of like the morning pages idea, but within a context of trying to get songs going, your brain is kind of primed on this idea, right? If writing like that is not your bag, you could also do like a word web where you put machine here and then you're like steel and then you're Philly and then you're like you do like a word association kind of a map. And both of these things solve the problem of the blank page. Because you no longer have a blank page. You have, like, tons and tons of words, and your brain is primed in this, and you're sort of tricking your brain into a flow state. And then you have the music, and you're like, "Oh, this would be so cool. Like, why don't I just, like, oh, I can put this together, and this phrase from my free write is really cool," and you can start highlighting things that kinda stick out and piecing together a lyric. And I think people don't always think about that because they're like, "Oh my god, it has to come from like, and this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not really how most songs get made." Like, that's like the 1 in a million song that like is like, and it's so great when it happens, but it happens because you do all this other work. It happens
Right.
because you kept showing up, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
happen just because, and I think that's we read about those songs because they are the magic songs, but I mean, I would say 99% of songs that you hear and listen to, anybody on this call, took minimum of 2 to 3 writes, like, rewrites, if not more, and didn't just, like, happen, they happened because it was work
Right.
happening. Uh
I'm not sure I've ever had, like, a fully formed thought in my entire life, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like, the kind of thought that I could just talk about for 3 minutes and then say, like, And that encapsulates all my feelings on that subject.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's such an unrealistic expectation to put on
It
yourself.
is, and like, especially if you're a new songwriter,
Yeah.
like, it does kinda come out, right? And it kinda comes
Yeah.
out, and a lot of times people don't wanna change that, and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." There's when you're a new songwriter, one of the can you still hear me? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my view changed, so I was like, "Wait, what happened?" When, is that you can't, like, create and analyze at the same time. I mean, you can't do it. The brain can't actually do those 2 activities at the same time. But
Right.
especially when you're a beginning songwriter, you have to kind of get to the end of it. You have to finish something to see what it is to be able to fix it. The more that you write, the better at you get it. We call it toggling. And so at this point in my songwriting career, I can be and stay in a flow state of creativity and still notice that, oh, that line isn't quite right. I need to change that. And I can actually toggle between the analytical and the creative side very quickly so that it does seem like I came out with something that was really finished, but I was actually rewriting it in the process of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the idea that, like, multitasking is not an actual thing that humans can do, but
It's
you
not.
do improve your skill of, like, switching between
Yeah.
modes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so I wanna talk about, like, related to that then, melodies.
Yeah.
Melodies and lyrics, how do they work together for you? And yeah, so I'll just start there.
Well, they have to work together,
Yep.
but they have 2 choices. They can either say something that's kind of ironic or they can be very sincere, right? And if you set something in a way that we're unfamiliar with, like you set sentence, you set it that way, sentence instead of sentence, right? We hear it differently and our reaction to it emotionally is different. And so melodies matter in that they help you tell your story, right? We were before the call started, I was laughing at APT because or apata or whatever you wanna call it, because, like, the melody in one of the sections is very static. It just doesn't move. It's like this rappy kind of a thing, right? And then, "Oh, don't you want me like I want you?" And it moves up and down as a question, right? "Don't you want me like I want you, baby?" It goes up, right? It doesn't go, "Don't you want me like I want you, baby?" That would be like that does not right, you're laughing. I mean, it's I'm not even in the same key, but, like, it's not this that is not the same sentiment. That says something completely different, and in songwriting, you have, like, 5 basic shapes of melodies. You have, like, static, a melody can go up, a melody can go down, a melody can go up and down, or a melody can go down and up, or it can go zigzag. And there are other things, but those are kind of like the basics, and depending on what section of the song you're in, you don't wanna have everything the same, right? Like, it's one of the reasons, like, Golden was such a hit is because these melodies, although challenging to sing and very movie, are very distinct in every section. And you know exactly where you are, even though the form is weird. You're never questioning I mean, the form is like A, B, C, B, C, B. It's bizarre, right? It's not a normal like verse chorus. I know what's coming, but at the same time, nobody's questioning it. And nobody's questioning it because of the way the lyric is landing with the message of the melody. And every section is distinct, right? It's not,
Yeah.
there's
It's
not.
like serving the story, like you're saying, and so you don't
Exactly.
think about it because it,
No.
like, makes sense in the context.
Yeah, and so, like, if you're writing a song and you feel it's not landing, like, I think that would be something to look at is, like, what's the differentiation between the sections in your song and the melodies, right?
Someone was asking in the chat about ways of, like, kinda building those skills with students and some other things, and we can look at that, but I just one thing that really helped me in my classroom was, like, we don't always think about the pitch in our speaking voice.
Yeah.
So if you just have your students speak the lyrics that they've written, a lot of times that leads you to your answer about how the melody.
100%.
Yes.
You can, like, extrapolate melodies, like, from speech. Like, it's super
Yeah,
fun to do. Like, opens up a lot of possibilities. Like, if
right.
you take that, opens up a lot of possibilities. 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 Ooh, that's pretty cool. And it feels like what I was speaking, but more musical. Now, that doesn't like what I just did isn't something like you're going to get right away. You sort of have to work with little things and really start listening and then making the intervals like bigger than they are. Because open, that's not open. But it's still up to like high to low with a bigger pitch, right? And so yeah, I that's one exercise I love doing. Another one is like intentionally creating melodies that move in specific directions. So like giving a prompt where it's a verse chorus song and the verse melody has to move in one direction and the chorus melodies have to move in a different direction. They can't move in the same direction. And then you can even get tricky with it with melodies and they can't start on the same part of the bar, so noth like, if your verses start on 1, your chorus can't start on 1. It can start either before 1 or after 1, but it can't start on 1. So stuff like that can help make your melodies more interesting, as well as make your phrasing more interesting and compelling, as well as differentiate it between the sections.
Yeah, I love that. Someone also asked, like, what do you do if the music for your song, you're, like, working on it, and then all of a sudden it doesn't feel like it goes with the lyric? And I think you spoke a little bit about, like, sometimes you can play with the irony of that, but I'd love to hear
Yeah, I mean,
more.
you could play with it, like, if you have, like, happy lyrics and you started writing, like, with minor chords, you could, like, own that and just decide, like, this is the way this is gonna be and it's gonna feel a little off, or change the chord. Like, if your melody is, C, E, G, you got a bunch of choices, right? If your melody is, like, C, E, G, F, D, C, E, C, right? Where does it end? It has to have a cadence or something, but, like, over th underneath those notes, I could either put an A minor 7 chord, okay, but that would give me that. I could put an F major 7 chord, I could put a C chord, I could put an E minor chord. I mean, there's a lot of different options that I could use to color that chord, and I think that's the thing to try is, like, sing your melody and sit down at an instrument and try for if you're not great at piano and you're like, "Wow, Kat, you just, like, went off the deep end in theory land here and I'm lost," but, like, one thing you could do is just, like, play a bass note and sing your melody and be like, "Does that one feel like it would go well, or do I like this bass note?" And if you like that one bass note, then try a note a third higher, either a major third or a minor third, to go with your melody and see, "Oh, do I like that?" And that's gonna give you the tonality of your chord, and then you just need the fifth, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and for students listening, if you're like major third, minor third, like all of that stuff too, they're really like I think the main thing here is being willing to play
Yeah.
and being willing to try something like 100 or I won't even say wrong, ways that don't feel right until it feels right. Um,
Like, you don't
and
have to know what you're playing, like, on guitar, I said, like, I'll play a chord and, like, I have no I'm on a alternate tuning and I have a capo on. I have no idea what chord I'm playing. I have to use the tuner and be like, "Oh, it's the notes are D, F sharp, G, A, and C." I'm like,
yeah,
"What is that chord? I don't know. It's a sus chord of some," it's like you
yeah,
have to know, until later. Uh
right. And speaking of students and questions, I do think we have some students who are watching along with us, and one of their questions that came up was, in your experience, how long does it take you? Like, you've described these different processes, and sometimes there's a lot of rewrites, and sometimes not as many. So, when you're like, "I'm gonna write a song," like, how much time do you give yourself,
Ooh,
I
that's a
ideally?
great question. Well, it varies. If I'm doing so I just finished a January challenge where I write a song a day. And for that challenge, although I didn't complete it because I got the flu in the middle of it, so I was really bummed. It's my first time ever not finishing a song a day, but because I literally was too sick. But I give myself an hour. And generally and that means like picking up instrument, warming up, like all of the things, like from sitting down to like start my practice and work to posting it with all of the things on it, I give myself an hour. So that usually means that I'm writing the song somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. That's as long as I take. Now, these are songs that are first draft songs, and I want to be really clear about that.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really important to finish songs. And so, if there are those of you out there that are like, I never finish songs because I don't think they're going to be good. I'm like, you don't know if they're going to be good or bad. They're just not done, period. And so,
Yeah.
with a finished draft, right, then at the end of January, I can go back and be like, I really like song on like January 2nd, and I like the one on the 5th, and like I actually like the one that I wrote on the last day of the challenge. And I can go back in and I have recordings and I have notes of like what I played and I have like the melody because it's like I have videos of all of this stuff. And so I can go back and listen and rework. And then that's going to take somewhere between, it depends. Like it'll be an easy fix and it just needs a little zhuzh. And some of them will need, time. I have a song that I've been working on for 3 years and I just keep coming back to it. And it just something's not happening. It's supposed to be a funny song about this woman who like is tired of dating, and so she makes up this boyfriend application, and like something is not funny enough. And so like I know I think I might need a co-writer because I'm not a funny like writer, but I'm trying to keep writing it. One of these days it'll work. But yeah,
Yeah, you're gonna wake up from a dream, and it's all gonna be there.
I know. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, I think that's super helpful, and thank you for the questions. Keep them coming.
Yeah.
It's really great to have you all participate, and it's so fun to see, hey, students in Sarah's classroom. Nice to have you here. Um, yeah. So, what is it like when you start with chords? We've talked like about like lyrics. You kind of talked about like beats. What if you just like start with chords? Like, what does that do for you versus kind of other methods or approaches?
I mean, on the guitar, that's generally where I am starting, like with some sort of vamp between two chords. And there is rhythm in that because of the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Which is very different than writing on the piano, which is one of the reasons I like it, is because it sets up a groove. Whereas on piano, if I just go bum, 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 I mean, what is that? Is it chicka 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 Is it chicka 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 chicka? Like there's nothing that's telling me that, right? So but I think like harmony sets up a vibe and an emotion, right?
Mm.
We can talk about the emotional life of chords and like if you play chords in certain orders, like if you play the 1 6 4 5 chord progression, but instead you play it 6 5 4 1, it feels different, right? If you play it 5 4 1 6, it feels different. Even though I
Yeah.
haven't changed the chords, it it evokes a different emotion, and therefore
Totally.
it's going to trigger a different vibe from whatever I'm writing over the top of it. And then I think
Are you starting sorry, I have a question
yeah.
about that. Are you starting to feel like as time goes on, you know that? Or, like if you're like, oh, if I like, do you have associations in your mind of like certain progressions evoking certain moods? Or do you always kind of have to like experiment a little bit till it feels right?
I think I have to experiment. Like, I mean, again, I mean, potentially, but I'm never writing. I'm not never, but I'm definitely trying to not write the same chord progression
Yeah.
every time that I come at the table. I mean, that would be definitely an exercise that you could do is like how many different songs can you write over like this chord progression in this order in this key? Like how many melodies can you come up with? That's like a fun exercise, but at the end of the day, like emotions are tied to songwriting and like there's going to be something that does pop up in certain and evoke certain things. So that's why I will intentionally put a capo on or, you know, like just because it puts me in a different space that
Right.
I'm not in. If I'm in open D all the time, then everything does start to sound, my melodies start to sound the same. And
So
yeah.
that kind of like transitions me to another question I want to ask. So sometimes people talk about writer's block. I know you have feelings about that.
I do.
Yeah, talk about writer's block, and what like, how you perceive it and how you move
Yeah,
through whatever that is.
love it. So I know this is controversial, but I don't think it exists. Okay, so and hear me out. I do think we have struggles to write. I think that's very real. But the struggle is not the writing. The struggle is actually the fear that it's going to be good. That is what stops people from writing. Um, if you want me to write a song right now, take out my guitar and write it in front of all these people on this Zoom call, I can totally do that. I don't have any ego in that game, and I don't care if it comes out bad. I can write the song. And I think that's what gets people stuck is they think that whatever they write has to be good. And my point is, no, what you write has to be done. You can make it good later, right? And it's getting through that. And I know this comes from, I mean, I've been writing songs now for 30 years, like somewhere between, 1 to 5 a week, depending on the week. That's a lot of not songs that no one's going to, I mean, songs that no one's going to hear. And um, but if you are feeling stuck and kind of in that like mindset of like, you've got all these like people in your head kind of telling you negative things, like you're never going to write good. And who do you think you are? And like, you can't even play. And like that, they get loud, right? And that is definitely stops you from writing. But again, it's fear based. It's not the actual truth of ourselves. So things you can do are number one, go for a walk. And I know that's strange advice, but when we walk, our brains disengage from certain things. You got to turn off your phone and you got to put it away and you just got to walk. And what happens is the neural synapses in our brains start working and they start thinking about, and you go on the walk and you start thinking about that idea that you had for the song. And like halfway through your walk, you get this cool, it's kind of an amazing thing. There is science behind this. And I'm a big sciencey human. And so like, that's a really cool thing. My dad's a neurologist. My sister's a neuropsychologist. Like I've been around brains for like my entire life. And walking, go for a walk, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, come back. You'll feel better. Right. And you'll feel like you have something to say. Number two is to literally write down a different goal. So like I will, instead of I'm going to write a good song, I will write a song, period. Like the goal is I'm going to finish this song. There's no good or bad, it's just done, right? I also think perfectionism is something that comes into creatives a lot. And so flipping that on its head as well and saying perfect equals good and done, not because perfect is not a thing. What you think is perfect and I think are 1,000 miles away, and it's unattainable. And I think going for mastery over the thing is a way cooler concept. Like Sarah Lewis has this book about mastery, and it's just that mastery is the absence of unnecessary thinking. It's just like, I love that.
That is beautiful. I'm gonna I like I need that like
It's so
on the back of my eyelids.
right. And then like, you could give yourself a prompt or go find one online, like write an AABA song with a trailing refrain and you have to use the name of a candy somewhere in your lyric, right? This will trigger your flow state and trigger your creativity into working. And yeah, you might not like the song. Again, it's not about good or bad. It's just finish, right? The more songs you write, the better you get at writing. And then the other thing is like finding a friend, when you're stuck and writing together, because again, most of the songs that we hear in the world are written by at least 2 people, if not 10. So
You're just really setting me up here
I,
because
I
that's
did try. I did take notes.
um before we move on and talk a little bit about co-writing and collaboration, the book about mastery is it the
Yes, it's The Rise. That's totally what it's called. It's
cool.
great.
Let's talk a little bit about collaboration, then we can go back and do any other questions that are coming up in the chat. And thanks again, people, for dropping questions. It's makes it just like more fun for us. So when I was growing up, I assumed that every person who was singing a song had written that song by themselves in an empty room, just them and an instrument.
Yeah.
And then it took me a long time to grow up and realize that that was very, very far from the truth.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about co-writing and, like, how that actually happens and why people choose to do it.
Yeah, I mean, in the professional world of songwriting, I don't think there's been a hit song that's had a single writer on it, in the last probably 5 years at least. Um, like, even the one that like Apata that we were talking about before, I mean, it's Bruno Mars, Rosé, Amy Allen. There's at least 2 more people on it, right? Like, and the way that works really quickly in the world is like you and I would get in a room and we're hired by a publishing company and we get hired to write a song for someone, let's say Taylor Swift, right? Because why not? And so we're gonna write it, and then there's a producer in the room too. So because they're creating kind of the track that's going like around all of our things. So you and I are top liners. And we've got a producer in the room. And so we're all kind of co creating things. And then Taylor Swift comes in about 2 hours into our session and she gives her opinion. So now you got 4 writers on the track. And then it goes away. And then, like, somebody else gets a hold of it, in a different room, and does some production or something on it, and, like, then they get another so by the time it gets to the thing, we've got, like, 6 writers on it, right? And the thing that you and I came up with at the beginning is there, but it's been morphed and changed, and there's you still get a full credit on it, but it's just, like, it's morphed and changed, and now there's another person getting a piece of the publishing, right? As well as we don't get a piece of the recording itself
Mhm.
because that's a whole different, like, payout, right, and copyright. So, um, but I think, like, on a scale of, like, what we're talking about here with students, I think and just for skill building, co-writing is awesome. So, like, you're a great drummer. You got great rhythm. You got really good melodies. I have killer lyrics, right? If we come together and write a song, we get to match our skill sets, right? And we get to meld them. And both of us are going to learn something from the situation. You're going to dig deeper into lyrics because I'm all about them and I'm going to learn
Yeah.
more about melody writing. And you're going to have a different way of thinking about melodies than I do. And so we can try different melodies against each other and probably come up with something that neither one of us would have actually come up with by ourselves. But together we create something that's very unique. It helps you get out as writer's block. Um, it balances, like, strengths and weaknesses in a room, and I don't mean weaknesses that, like but we all have stuff that we're working on or that's, like, not our particular, like, cup of tea, and so,
Yeah.
um, I think too, like, when you get in a room, the idea is that there's no bad idea. Just throw out, like, even the silly ones, because if you let them fester, then they just kinda get in your way, and it's better to just you don't know, like, a silly idea, like, "Hey, what about the school bus? Like, why don't we write about something yellow?" And, like, all of a sudden, that triggers an idea of you, as a child, like, getting on the bus with your strawberry shortcake lunchbox, and, like, you had this, like I'm serious, but, like, stuff like that
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it's because you said this dumb thing or silly thing, not dumb, but, like, kind of like out to left field idea in the room that led to this memory of yours, and that became the thing that we wrote about. And we never would have gotten there if I hadn't said something about a yellow school bus.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think it's just, like, so in my experience as a co-writer, it does take practice to be less precious with your own ideas.
Yes. Yeah.
To say, like because if you have something that you do wake up and you have a fully formed idea, like, that's incredible, just, like, sit down and write that thing.
Yeah, and
You
don't
have
give
to
it
have,
away.
like yeah, you have to have, like, a different mindset when you're writing with other people, and I think that that's such a good skill for us to learn at any age.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, "We're gonna build something together, and it doesn't belong to me, and it doesn't belong to you, it's gonna, like, become bigger than that."
Yeah, and, like, in co-writes too, like, it might not belong to either one of us because we could be writing for another artist and pitching it to them, and it's gonna
Right.
belong to that artist, and we're just gonna be the songwriters on it, right? Like, we're not even we're not even on the recording.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
That's amazing.
It
I
is.
I do wanna make sure we have time
Yeah,
for
let's
some
go.
questions here. Um, Let me go back. I saw a great one here. Your best approach to teaching students who have just started to learn instruments and now they're, like, wanting to do something original. They wanna learn songwriting. What are some, like, beginner things? Like, we've touched on this a little bit, but what are maybe some, like, tangible activities you could try with those folks?
I think first is talk about, like, melody and lyrics, right? Like, what do you need to make a song? I talk about this a lot, is just you really just need a melody and lyrics. The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round all through the town. Anybody listening to the call, like, I don't need harmony to make that happen. I don't need an instrument. I don't like, I'm having fun. It has rhythm. It's catchy. So I think the first thing is maybe like working with a voice memo or something like that and just trying like having lyrics. You could give them lyrics, if that, or create lyrics as a group, and then thinking about melody and like trying to say, okay, in our verses, what do we want our chorus to be a little bit bigger. So what does that look like? And talking about the craft of songs.
Right.
I also think even before that is actually doing a lot of listening and active listening in classes and drawing of maps, right? Like
Right.
what does that look like? It's dot 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 dot. And then don't you want me like I want you, babe? Just like connect the dot kind of deals, right? And we're not talking like you don't need to go on staff paper. Like we don't need that. We just need a piece of paper and like dots. And like what's
Right.
happening in the melodies in these songs? And what do we notice about the melodies in these 5 songs? And can we create a melody that mirrors what's happening in these songs, right? A static melody in your verses and then one that moves up and down in your choruses, right? Like I think that might actually be the first thing that I would do, just thinking about it like aloud because it's a question just
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
like I think I would analyze some stuff and like do some song maps, and have the students like create song map for song that they like and then have discussions about what's happening in the melodies.
Yeah.
And then take those and try to create something that kind of matches that because you're not going to create the same thing. It's just like kind of an idea, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
then adding, then the teacher can add harmony or you can help like, okay, so you have this melody. Do you like this chord underneath it or do you like this chord underneath it? Like, and then showing them what it is, and it becomes a full round learning process of like, okay, we wrote the song, we have the melody and the lyrics. Our teacher helped us figure out what the chords are, right? And now we're going to learn the chords and play them underneath our song.
Yeah. Very cool. And for the song maps,
Yeah.
I'll just, like, plug a little bit. I don't know if you've ever seen this, the, like, hook theory, the hook
Oh
test?
yeah, the hook theory. We also have them on SFME. Like we have like a bunch of like song maps and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And, yeah, so SFME, Songwriting
Songwriting
for
for
Music
music yeah.
Educator. Kat's awesome website that has a lot of tools. Some of them are linked on the page where you found information about this session. Please go dive into those things because there are templates and there are
Yeah.
ways to get started with all of this. So you don't have to like take all of this and then go create 100 new things. A lot of it already exists.
Yeah, we existed. Like me and like I want to be clear, like Sarah Gulish is my partner
Yeah.
prime on that. So like I'm not alone on that. So yeah, shout out.
You're co-writer for this curriculum. Um,
Things.
So there was a question way back that is a great question that I missed, and I want to circle back to it. Tell us, you talked about song seeds.
Yeah.
Are those like lyrics, couplets? Are they titles? Are they melodies? Like, is it everything?
It's all of it. It's
Okay.
kind of like anything. It's not really like um lyrics necessarily. It's more like ideas.
Okay.
Hang on. I'll read some of mine. Being the older person because you don't have kids and you're hanging out with others who do have kids. Mug equals coffee break, 1800s coastal communities. Write a song like Dua Lipa. D major 7 tuning. I thought I knew that thing you keep pondering about, that you think it's going to be one thing and it's not. Facial expressions of exasperated people and the communal stress of humans and how it's contagious. Payphone, love, pay for love. cotton candy, unicorn, glitter. C, E flat, D7, G7, 6 1 2 1. Like, like
I I love how half of these sound like academic paper titles and the other half are like the cut up machine from like the back of a candy wrapper.
yeah. And if I could show this, I mean, it's just like a random list. It's like, as a songwriter, you are an observer of the world. And so I'm just writing down random thoughts that come to my head. I ride a lot of mass transit, and so like I just observe somebody doing something, or I read something, or I find a cool like chord guitar or a guitar or chord pattern that comes across my Instagram, and I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Let me, like, write that down," or I listen to a song and I'm like, "Ooh, I like the chord progression in that song," and I'll write down, like, Taylor Swift Ophelia's chord progression, and it's just like, so when the idea behind that is, again, not having writer's block, because anytime I wanna sit down to write a song, I have ideas in front of me. I'm never sitting with a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah. Um, there's a couple Jen, do we have time for like 2 more questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna interject for 1 minute, and then you guys can take 2 more questions. So I'm gonna put that attendance sheet in the chat one more time because, in about 9 minutes, we're gonna wrap this up and stop recording, and then we have some prizes, to do some drawings for, so that's fun, but you have to fill out the form to be eligible. Alright.
Yay! Okay. So many questions, and I apologize, we're not gonna get to all of them. But hopefully we can start, like, keep incorporating them into the things that we're
Yeah.
making for you all. So, a forwarding question from a high school senior currently making music. Um, so their question is about when you go back to those things that are done, but you know that they're, like, not perfect or the way you want them to be. When you're feeling then you, like, come back and you're stuck, what are some things that you do to help you fill in the blanks?
Uh, well, I have to decide like what's not working first, right? So, first thing I would go through is like something isn't hitting right, and so I'm gonna play it and be like, is it the harmony? Is it the actual like chord structure? Is that like not vibing with my thing? If that's cool, then and I don't know if this doesn't have to be in any order. It's just sort of like these are the things that I would look at. What about my melodies? Are they different enough in every section? Are they doing the
Mm.
job that I need them to be doing? Like, if I have a pre-chorus, is my pre-chorus actually acting as a on-ramp into the chorus from the bridge? Or is it kind
Or did I just wanna write 2 choruses and I didn't know it?
Right, exactly, and maybe something needs to move. Maybe my pre-chorus is actually my bridge. Like, examining the sections and seeing if they're doing the job that I want them to do. And then if they are doing the job, maybe they're just not jobbing hard enough. And so I might need to change the rhythm or the melody of them to make them do their job better, right? And then lyrics too, like, are the lyrics is my rhyme scheme different in every section? If it's all a through the whole song, it's pretty boring. Rhymes lead us through songs. And so changing up the rhyme scheme. So if it is all A in your verses, then it better be A, B, C, B or something different in your chorus to break that up. And then you can go back to it. Are the rhymes not, and I don't mean like is all ing. I just mean like it's all the same every time you come to the end of the
Right.
line, right? But also if you have a lot of E rhymes at the ends of your verse and a lot of E rhymes in your chorus and in your bridge, not necessarily the strongest choice. So going back and finding other words to fill in different things. And so it's taking a look at each one of the sections or the parts of the song and seeing what piece isn't working the way I need it to work, and then fixing and zhuzhing.
And I love how you're speaking to, like, is it doing what I need it to do? And understanding that function. So, like, if you're I think the student specifically was like, "Oh, what if I'm adding strings in here or something." It's like, "Why? What do you want them to like, is it supposed to make the listener feel a certain way? Is it emphasizing the melody that you put in?" And I think that that is just so helpful. It's like, "Yeah, what's the point of it?" And then it'll help you get to the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so last question, and again, I apologize, there were really good questions in here, But we'll end with for students currently, what are your biggest recommendations if they do actually want to build a career or go further in songwriting? What should they be like studying, people to follow, anything that would kind of help them get a little further down that road? It's a big question.
This is a fabulous question. Okay. I know I teach at a school, but you don't have to go to school to do this. But schools like Berkeley, USC, Belmont, and Clive Davis will give you a lot of information quickly uh, that you cannot get out in the world. Or you can, but it just will take you a really long time. So I think like school is a good option. Number two is read. There are a lot of songwriting books out there. My favorite, Pat Patterson's Writing Better Lyrics is a killer book if you want to get better at lyrics. And Music, Lyrics, and Life by Mike Errico is my other favorite songwriting book about kind of tech. It's got a little bit of tech in there. Our book, Songwriting for Music Educators, even if you're not an educator, will walk you through a lot of different parts of the songwriting world. You do not have to be an educator to read it. It's not set up for that.
If you
I
try to
think
order it and you're not an educator, they'll say, "No, you
no,
can't."
they won't.
This book.
Absolutely not. No. You could also, I think, other things to do would be like, work on learning an instrument that you feel comfortable enough playing because that will help you like just feel more confident. Work on learning your theory skills. You don't have to be a jazz musician level theory, but understanding how that works, all of this is just going to make you a faster songwriter and a better songwriter. Like the more knowledge equals power, and the more you have, and study songs, like listen to a song somewhere between 5 to 10 times and like figure it out. What's happening in the bass? What's happening in the chords? What's happening with the lyric? What's happening with the melody? Like, what's happening with the arrangement? How does it all fit together? What's the vibe of the song? What's the BPM of the song? Like, hardcore, like, that's how songwriters have learned, like, since the beginning of time. They didn't go to school, they just studied, and then, like, followed the careers of the songwriters, not of the artists. So when you go on to Google and you type in, like, it's really easy to find the songwriters because they're credited in the lyrics. So if you type in a song that you like and you type in, up at the lyrics, at the bottom of the page will be all the writers, and then start figuring out who are these writers, right? And what do they do? And like look who wins or who's nominated for Songwriter of the Year and go check out all 5 of those people. Amy Allen won, but like, but she's one of 5, like, and those are the songwriters who are writing the hits. So like, what are they writing? Listen, did they do podcast things? They do like, go listen and most importantly, write a lot of songs. Like you need to write thousands of songs if you want to be a songwriter. And I don't like, and just bad songs. Like a lot of them are not going to be good. You just have to write them. And you have to practice. Practice songwriting is a craft as much as it is like something. And so like you just have to practice. And it is practicable. It's you can totally get better at it. I'm living proof. Like my first song was, ugh, you know.
Well, I think that's a really good place to wrap. This has been so helpful, and I think that there's like a lot of good inspiration in here, and hopefully some and some practical things as well for folks to get started. But I just want to give you a huge thank you, Kat, for
It's so
being
fun.
here.
We could talk forever. We discovered this.
Yes. Kat and I met in person recently, and we talked, I mean, easily for an hour, and we were like, well, okay, I think we could do this forever, but
Yeah.
so then Jen, I'll let you take it from here, but yeah, I see tons of thank yous in the comments, so I know I'm not alone and really appreciating all your time and talent and energy and being with you.
Well, thank you. And like, I'm happy to answer questions, from people. You can find me. I'm easy to find. So, if you have questions, just reach out.